Well, hello everyone. It's time for our kids' Bible class video. And Mr. Joe, we are continuing our studies of being in the Lord's army. And we are still with Joshua and the people of Israel. And we are taking the land of Canaan. And we're driving out the nations that were there before the Israelites came.
Boy, they are really going to have to fight.
Yeah.
And in fact, they've already been doing that. And they've had some big battles. But they're not done.
No,
There's still more.
And you know, with all of these lessons, Mr. Joe, we've been talking about the importance of faith, the importance of trusting in God and in His strength, not trusting in our own strength. We've been talking about the importance of obeying God and listening to God and doing everything that God has said. All of those things are lessons that we learn from these stories in the book of Joshua.
You know, something that's starting to stick out to me in these stories is that when God makes a promise, He always keeps that promise. Always. And so if God told His people that if you do this or do that, and I will be with you and I will help you, He was there every time.
That's right. And you know, God has made pretty great promises to us too.
Yes.
And we need to know that just like He kept the promises to the Israelites many, many years ago, He's going to keep promises to us too.
That's right. That's right.
So, Mr. Joe, I want you to think about the people of Israel and Joshua and what they have left to do. As we said already, they've already driven out some of the people from the land of Canaan, but there's a lot more to remove. There's a lot more people that they still have to fight against. And some of these nations and some of these people, they weren't just average people like you and me. Like the Bible says there were giants that lived in the land of Canaan.
You know, that's right. And in fact, if you think back to some of our earlier lessons when the 12 spies went up into the land to look at it and they were scared of the people, remember?
Yeah.
Because they were so big.
That's right. And they said, we look like grasshoppers compared to them. So Joshua and Caleb and the Israelites have to go and fight some of these giants. And we're going to talk about that in our lesson today.
That's right.
So how is it that the Israelites can win their battles? Well, what have we been saying all along? God will be with them. They have to trust God. They have to obey God.
Yes. You know, there's some powerful lessons here for us to understand God keeps His promises, and that if God is on our side, whatever battles we have to fight, He will be there for us and He will help us.
Yeah, that's right. So now it's time to take the northern portion of the land of Canaan.
So, we've studied already some of the battles in the south. There was Jericho and Ai. Those cities are called out. But do you remember how some of the kings in the south, they banded together? Because they could make a bigger army that way. They'd be stronger, and they thought they could overcome Israel that way. That didn't work.
Didn't work.
That didn't work, because it didn't matter how big the army of the enemies was, God was on the side of Israel, because Israel was His people, and they were listening to what God said. And so there were those battles kind of in the southern part of the land.
And I think maybe we should show them on the map.
Oh, yes.
The south and the north.
That's
so
right.
If I can show you here on the map, this is the land of Canaan, and we've talked about some of the battles that the people have fought down here in the southern portion of the land, down here by the Dead Sea. But now it's time to move up to the north, up here to the top part of the map, and they're going to have to start taking the cities up in that region.
And so you think about those kings banding together and taking their armies and putting them together. Oh, so there were...
I bet they had 10 or 25 soldiers.
I think it's more than that.
You think?
I think they had hundreds, or no, really.
Probably thousands.
Probably
right?
thousands.
Yeah,
They
many
probably
thousands.
had thousands of soldiers. So you think about being a soldier and having to go fight against an enemy that was thousands or tens of thousands in size. How would that make you feel?
But you know what? I seem to remember another story in the Bible. Not a story that's in the book of Joshua. This is a story that's many years down the road. But there was a story about the Israelites when the Assyrian nation was coming up against them. And there's a story about one angel who in one night killed 85,000 Assyrian, 185,000 in one night, one angel.
That says something about the power of God.
I don't think the Israelites need to be worried.
I think you're right. But you know, you have to think about how that must have felt to them when they saw thousands of soldiers that they were going to have to go again. But you know what? Joshua and the children of Israel, they listened to what God said.
Good.
Yeah, good.
That's always the right thing to do.
They listened to what God said, and they obeyed the Lord's command. And none of those enemies were able to overtake them. And in fact, you know, they fought against God's people. They fought against God's people as hard as they could. They wouldn't make peace with them in any way, and it took a while. You know, it took some time for the children of Israel to win over all of the land of Canaan. But you know, in time, God gave the promised land to Israel just like He said He would do.
That's right. That's right. You know, I think it's good for us to emphasize something that you just said about it took a long time for the Israelites to take the land of Canaan. It took years for them to do that. You know, we read through the Bible and we go right through the book of Joshua. We can read through it so quickly. We might think that the Israelites, you know, they took the land in, 5 or 6 weeks maybe, it only took a month or two.
Oh,
no, it took years, in fact. And actually the Bible says that when the Israelites got all of the land, when God gave it to them, the Bible says that Joshua was an old man at this point.
An old man. Now, he wasn't an old man when we started with Joshua a long time back with Moses. He was the young man back then.
That's right. That's right. So, the book of the book of Joshua covers a pretty long period of time in the history of the people of Israel. Now let's get back to those giants.
Oh yeah, these giants kind of bother me.
Well, I would think so. They would bother me too. I seem to remember one giant in the Bible in particular. His name was Goliath. He was kind of a scary sounding fellow.
Yeah.
So do you remember how do you say it? Anakim? No, that's not right.
Anakim?
I think that's it. The Anakim. Yeah. And we said that the 12 spies long ago, 40 years before, they went into the promised land to spy out the land, and they saw these big giants. They saw these Anakim there, and they were afraid of them. Well, those giants are still in the promised land. They still live there, and the Israelites have to drive them out. They can't be afraid of them. So these Anakim, they were big, tall men, big, tall soldiers. In fact, the word Anakim, Mr. Joe, this is kind of funny. It means long necks.
Is that right?
It means long necks. Now, I don't think they look like giraffes, but they were tall. That's the idea.
That's the point, that they were tall. They were big soldiers.
So, if the Israelites, who were not long-necked, they were not giants, and they've got to go and fight against these giants, I think we could understand that they might be a little bit afraid.
That's right. But I hope what they thought about at that time was, well, remember when they crossed the river? They were scared then too. And when they went to Jericho, they were concerned. And when they went to Ai and things didn't work well there, I'm sure they had to have been scared. But every time, I'm hoping they've learned that as long as God is on their side, it's going to be okay.
And so if they'll trust God, they can drive out the Anakim just like they've driven out these other cities and other people as well. So by trusting God, Joshua took the land of Canaan. They wiped out the Anakim in their cities, and there were none of them left except in a few cities, but most of them were driven out. And so we start to think about another major character in this story. We learn about Caleb, who drove out the Anakim in the land that he was going to receive.
That's right. Now, Joshua and Caleb are a couple of men that we started talking about.
The two spies who were from that original 12.
That's right. You remember the 12 spies, and they went into the land, and they came back, and 10 of the spies were saying, "Oh no, we can't go.
There's giants in there."
But Joshua and Caleb, they were the two that stood up and said, "No, as long as God is with us, we can do this." But the people wouldn't listen to them.
That's right.
And that whole generation is gone now. They've all died in the wilderness, but not Joshua and Caleb. Because they had such great faith, God has spared them. And so now as Joshua is leading Israel into the land and they're conquering the land, it's time now for Caleb to be granted the land that is going to be his. because he was faithful to God all of this time. And I think we do need to think about the land as being a gift from God to the people. He was giving it to them. They had to fight and to run out all of the evil people in the land, but it was God who was giving them the land. And so after Israel had conquered the land, it had to be divided into 12 tribes.
Yes.
Now, we've already been talking about that some when we do our map,
Yep.
and trying to understand where the names of all of the tribes. And so at this point in our story, there's not all of those tribes yet. But now they're being put there now. The tribes are being put in place. And so, Caleb, one of those spies who had trusted in God, he went to
Joshua.
Joshua. I
Yeah.
was going to say Jacob. I knew that wasn't right.
No. He's a very old man at this
That's
point.
right.
Yeah.
He went to Joshua and he said, I'm ready now. Give me my land. And Joshua did that.
And what I love about this story is it wasn't a land that was already prepared for him.
Oh, that's right.
And all he had to do was sit back and kick his feet up and relax. No, he had to go drive out those giants.
Right.
He had to go fight for it. He had to go
That's
prepare the land. And he had a lot of work to do. And you know why that's really interesting, Mr. Joe, is because the Bible says that when he was given his land, he was 85 years old. And 85. He still had work to do. 85.
And Caleb even made the point, that he's 85 years old, but he felt just like he did 45 years ago when they began the wilderness wandering.
Right. That's
God has spared him and given him strength to this time, so much so that he's ready to go and do battle against those giants.
And fight against those mighty Anakim who are there in the land that is about to become his. He has to drive them out.
You got to say something about faith. The faith of Caleb at this point is just amazing to me.
Yeah.
How strong his faith is. And that faith, he had that faith back when they went into the land and the 10 came back saying, no, we can't go. And Joshua and Caleb were saying, yes, we can. Caleb never lost that.
That's right. And God rewarded him because of that.
Right.
Now, there is one sad thing that we have to mention. We have to mention this. The Israelites were told by God that he would give them this promised land and that they were to drive out all of the inhabitants of the land.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Joe, they drove out most of them, but they didn't quite get all of them.
You see, God said that you have to drive out all of these enemies, all of these evil people, and he told them why. Or else they will be a problem to you later.
Yeah.
And here they've come into the land, and they've driven out most of the evil people, but there are still some cities with evil people.
Yeah, but most is good enough, right? I mean, we did most of what God said, right?
You see, there's where we get into problems, because sometimes we do the same thing. We say, I almost did everything that Mom and Daddy told me to do.
Yeah, I almost completely cleaned my room.
Yeah, I almost did all of my homework.
Yeah. I see. That makes sense. I understand that now.
So there's going to be a problem.
Yeah. And the problem is that those inhabitants in the land of Canaan, they didn't worship God.
No.
They worshipped idols. They believed in false gods.
Mm-hmm.
And the true God told the Israelites, if you don't drive them out, they're going to influence you. And they're going to teach you to worship their gods instead of worshiping me. And you know what? Sadly, Mr. Joe, that's exactly what happened.
It is. The more we read later in the Bible story, we are going to see that it happened just like God said.
Yep.
And the remnants of those people are going to influence Israel and pull them away from God. We can cause a lot of troubles for ourselves when we do not obey God completely.
Yeah, that's right. And when we don't obey our parents completely,
Right.
or when we don't obey our school teachers completely,
Right.
or whoever it may be,
Yeah.
we need to do everything that they have said. We need to do everything that God has said.
Boy, there are some powerful lessons that come out of this for all of us.
Yep.
that all of us need to learn the idea and the importance of doing God's will completely all of the time.
Well, that's it for our class today. Thank you for watching with us. Kids, keep working on your memory verses for the quarter. And until we do this again,